Yes. Welcome back, everybody. Can I again have a round of applause also for the live stream so they know and hear your enthusiastic presence? So I wonder if the people that are in the live stream also changed their place in the house to sit, but I am proud of you guys because I can tell you changed your seats from what my eyes from here can see. Yes, thank you very much for that. I promised that we will have a panel discussion, and amazingly, we'll have a whole hour for that, so we can really dig into it. You can already see the panel members sitting here, except one who is in the train, but we know public transportation in the Netherlands can sometimes be challenging. But Peter Derek Hoff is on its way and will join us whenever he gets in, so you guys know that. I'm just going to give an introduction about what we're going to be talking about for the upcoming hour. I hear a little bit talking. If you please could quiet down a little, that would be great. Thank you very much. We're going to talk about the huge sustainability challenges and a rapidly changing world that require the NGO sector to adapt, innovate, and change. We are facing interlinked challenges such as climate change, as I said, the natural disasters we've been facing only this week, even, shrinking civic space and increasing inequalities. And I think it's amazing that equality came up in the envisioning of your part, and which manifest as growing migration, geopolitical tensions, and border issues, among other things. In response, we are seeing bold actions across society to pioneer and scale solutions for today's, to least say, complex challenges. And we are also coming to terms with our colonial legacies, as Liana also mentioned, that it's important to be aware of, and issues of governance that are profoundly questioning the legitimacy of a global aid system. And this requires introspection on the role of NGOs for dealing with the internal governance crises and also systemic transformation. I always love these kinds of words, systemic transformation, etc. But I also think it's a bit of a jargon in this sector. But I have a whole panel that's going to assist me to dissect that. But I want you to keep one main question in mind, and that is, what can we learn from alternative and successful approaches that sought to navigate these challenges? It's also for the panel, but also beyond the NGO sector. What can other sectors teach us about collaboration? How can we learn from each other? And with our panel members, we will explore this. Let me go to the introduction. I also want to welcome our panel members. Can I have a round of applause for them? We agreed that they're going to give also a brief pitch of what role the organization and organization in their sector plays, but also beyond that, what the impact is and whatever they're willing to share with us today. And I'm going to start with you, Gerald Abila, founder of Barefoot Law. Gerald is a visionary legal advocate who will shed light on leveraging technology and legal empowerment to bridge the justice gap for marginalized communities. Take it away for us, Gerald. Yes.
Thank you. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the screens on the side, and it's interesting how technology has made people like me more visible. And I think it's an interesting point to start with. And I thank the Pathos Festival for inviting me here. And congratulations on making 10 years. I've been traveling to Europe. I live in Kampala, Uganda. I've been traveling to Europe for the past slightly over 10 years. The first time I traveled to Europe, my plane went straight over South Sudan, Libya, over the Mediterranean and into Europe. The past 5 years have been interesting. The plane travels, diverts over South Sudan. There's some gymnastics that goes on to get to Europe, but the flight is not straightforward anymore. South Sudan is in conflict. North Sudan is in conflict. Libya is in conflict. So many immigrants and refugees are dying in the Mediterranean. it also reminds me of the privilege that I have. I'm flying, but 10,000 feet, 30,000 feet down, someone else is drowning. And it always gets me thinking how, despite the progress we are making in terms of technology, despite the progress we are making in terms of development institutions, NGOs, democracy, we are still regressing in terms of our humanity. I think I'm here today to get inspired, and I hope I get inspired, and I hope collectively we are reminded of our humanity. And I hope with this inspiration we leave here with positive vibes and solutions to some of these challenges, and I look forward to the conversation. I know I probably have not answered anything about what I do and the impact, but it's just a reflection.
We have a whole hour, so that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a round of applause? And your neighbor, Saranel Benjamin from Mama Cash. As the co-executive director of Mama Cash with 30 years of experience in the development sector, you demonstrated visionary leadership in decolonizing partnerships in aid and racial justice and intersectional feminism. Can you tell us a bit more?
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really good to be here. I was just saying to people outside, this is my first Dutch public speaking event, so no nerves at all. So in preparation for this panel, I was talking to some of my colleagues about what is innovation, and in our, as you do in development, you overthink and overanalyze, as we do. But one of them said, it's really just simply about being able to identify what the problem is, and then be able to see, what the solution is or how you're going to be fixing it. And I would go a step further to say that, the fix also needs to be transformative, and it needs to be disrupting positively. And then it was like, yeah, okay, the Mama Cash is, it is an innovative funder. It's been around for 40 years, and in those 40 years, it's managed to move 92 million euros to feminist movements and women-led groups who are at the forefront of the struggle for gender justice and climate justice. But the trick in this is that it's doing it in a context where international aid and international funding is still largely colonial, it's still racist, and it's still patriarchal. And we can see, that the decisions that are being made about how money is going to be spent is still, essentially almost exclusively being made in the global north. And funds don't flow to the global south; they trickle down from the global north to the global south. And information and knowledge is still being extracted out of the global south. And the result of this is that feminist movements and women-led groups in the global south and global east, and especially those that are led by black feminists, remain largely underfunded. OECD data is showing that women's rights organizations received around 1% of official development assistance that was dedicated to gender equality and women's empowerment. For climate-related ODA, the figures are much lower. And even lower than that is the funds that are going directly to feminist movements and women's rights movements in the global south. So here's Mama Cash. Not only have we moved those millions, but we've done it in an innovative way, or in innovative ways. 6 years ago, we introduced participatory grant making as our mechanism for moving money. Today, all of our funds, all 5 of our funds, are fully participatory. And this means that the people who are at the front line of struggles get to make the decisions about who gets what money. We don't fund through themes because we believe that people don't live single-issue lives, and nor do they experience a crisis in a singular way. We fund in a way where we also center trust to the groups that we are working with, and that is seen as us removing the heavy, onerous, and burdensome compliance that often accompanies grants. And in this way, we have redefined how we see risk. For us, it's more risky not to fund an organization or an issue than the risk associated with the money. So this means that we can fund groups that are hardest to reach. We can fund groups that can't register because registering is going to endanger their safety, especially in this context of shrinking civic space. We are now operating in a global context that is heavily dominated by the anti-rights movement that you can see is rolling back on the gains made for women, the LGBTQI community, for black and brown people, for immigrants and refugees. And at the same time, we are seeing ODA being reduced amongst global North governments. However, the feminist movements that we support, or that Mama Cash supports, particularly movements that are led by and who champion the rights and the voices of structurally excluded communities in the global South and East, are the ones who are delivering transformative and sustainable results on gender justice, on climate justice, on democracy, on human rights. And they are contributing to countering the rising authoritarianism, and they are also building open democratic spaces. And even in places where the rights that are under attack are being done where there are still democratic processes in place. And they're also advancing a more sustainable and just planet for all of us. So these are the ones that Mama Cash support, and for me, these are the true innovators.
For your first Dutch event, as you said, this is a great kickoff. Can I have a round of applause for Sarah now? Thank you. Tessa, you also have an introduction, of course. Tessa Wernink, as the co-founder of Fairphone. I also was curious who has the Fairphone in this audience. I have a few there. Oh, yeah, more than 10, I think. Yeah. So, as the co-founder of Fairphone and the undercover activist, Tessa passionately advocates for ethical and sustainable practices in the corporate world, demonstrating how businesses can contribute significantly to positive change. And also, welcome, Peter Derkhoff. You made it. I will introduce you later. Tessa.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me, Partos. When you first invited me, I thought, really, for a corporate activist in this area? So it's already really nice to be here and to taste the atmosphere of a NGO gathering. I can't actually say that in corporates the atmosphere tends to be, the only word I can think of sometimes is a bit hostile and competitive. So it's already a good introduction. I wanted to say, yeah, as a corporate activist, I have been and am in the business of making things visible. And especially when it comes to business, because I think business and corporations have been doing harm for a long time and are still doing harm. And while I think a lot of people in business think that they're doing a really good job, and that's true, we need to call out some of the things that aren't going well. Because I still believe anyway that business and business models can help us accelerate and put down a just, equitable and regenerative world. And if they can't help us, then we can at least slow them down. And why is it important to make it visible, which sometimes means making it uncomfortable, is because if we don't understand what's not going well, then we can't make the demands to change. And if we can't make the demands to change what we want in organizations, then we can't make the interventions and we can't transform businesses. So my background is co-founder of Fairphone, which I haven't been with for 5 years, by the way. So I just wanted to say that when we started Fairphone, we were part of a bigger community of people who were trying to disrupt what business is like from the inside, disrupt the industry, in a way that we were asking questions and we were trying to role model what it could be like if you were a for-purpose business. And I think that that's still happening with social enterprises, is they're role modeling what it can be like to experiment, what it can be like to have different forms of governance, different forms of ownership. So how can businesses be different? And over the past 10 years, let's say, since I started Fairphone, and especially the last 3 years, I've noticed that while social enterprises are incredibly important, it's not going fast enough. And we need people in corporations to also do this entrepreneurship or this intrapreneurship, or what I call employee activism. Because I think that when people inside organizations start to speak up together as a group about the things that need to be different, call out the bullshit sometimes, then we can start urging companies to act, and actually they can become catalysts for change. And I call the Undercover Activists is an organization I set up. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, you know, everybody responds differently, but I don't think, maybe if I asked here, who's an activist? I know who would call themselves an activist, how many people raise their hands? I want to also kind of maybe extend what does it mean to be an activist. I have a sticker here that says activism is love made visible, and I think there's something that everybody gets active about the moment you crosses boundaries, and I think that that's what we do, is when we can resist what is happening in a system, then we can start to stand up and we can transform. So that's what we would like to see. How can we move from transparency to transformation? Thank you.
Tessa, before we're going to go to the next one, I am curious, can you repeat your definition of activism, and then we can ask the audience again who then identifies themselves as activists? Can you repeat that with your
as if activism is love made visible, who identifies as an activist?
Thank you. See? We're making
Nice,
changes already. Thank you very much. Can I have a round of applause for Tessa? Peter Dirk Hof, the newly appointed Director of Development Cooperation, brings a wealth of diplomatic experience, having previously served as the Dutch ambassador to Yemen. His insights will offer unique perspectives on collaboration and innovation in addressing and pressing global challenges. Can you also give your own pitch/introduction to us?
Thank you very much. And let me first of all apologize deeply to all of you for arriving late. I hate to arrive late. I can blame the train. I will blame the train, but still it doesn't. It's no excuse. But I'm very happy to be here, and I indeed just started as Ambassador Women's Rights and Gender Equality and Director for Social Development at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And when it comes to the topic of today, let me just share with you our concern. We are halfway through the path towards 2030, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they are quite far out of reach. Only 15% of the targets that we set in 2015 are on track. The Secretary General of the United Nations, he said earlier this year that we need about 3,000 billion annually to make it to the Sustainable Development Goals. So our challenge, and our challenge from our perspective of development cooperation, is daunting. So we know there is not a lot of additional money coming in. So we need to find innovative ways of partnering in order to get back on track towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are a number of challenges, and I see them especially in my own work, having arrived only 8 weeks ago. But we need, as I said, to partner as government with civil society, with business, with social enterprise, with philanthropies in order to get to the Sustainable Development Goals. At the same time, we do see the geopolitical challenges. We've been confronted with them over the last few years. We see civic space shrinking. Decreasing. We see a very strong pushback. We see a strong anti-rights movement, and this movement has always been there, but never ever has it been that organized, that well funded. So we encounter a great number of challenges. There's also a lot of good news. I will not be talking about it right now, but we see, of course, especially in some of the fields I'm working in, like SRHR, we still see positive developments, but the challenges are daunting. So we need to strengthen our cooperation, and we need to strengthen innovation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a round of applause? Lastly, Dr. Anneloes Smitsman, you don't need an introduction anymore because we already saw you. Peter, you haven't seen her, but she was the keynote speaker. And would you like to share with us your thoughts?
Sure, my pleasure.
I think it's working. Try.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes. It works. So yes, EARTHwise Centre is based in Mauritius. So for me, having been raised in the Netherlands and done all my studies here, but then having lived in the global south for 28 years now, which makes me feel old, gives me a very interesting perspective also on all the development issues. As EARTHwise Centre, what we are doing is applying the wisdom and evolutionary principles of living systems to design of new economic models, new governance models as well, helping to create a different narrative. We've done a lot of work for ecological literacy development with schools in Mauritius, where we've trained thousands of teachers and implemented these programs in 18 different schools for 20,000 students. But also we've done a lot of work really between sectors. So, and by so in working with the public-private partnerships, global dialogues as well, for being able to the kind of visioning sessions that we did earlier, to really help create that engagement and for the implementation also of the SDGs. And what we are currently focusing on is the co-creation of an open world immersive game for empowering younger generations for civilizational transformation. And what we're doing in this game is to help raise awareness about the underlying game dynamics of the sustainability crisis. And we are referring to this as a Moloch game dynamic, whereby there's constantly incentives to sacrifice long-term collective well-being for short-term personal gain or short-term myopic gain. And what we find in a lot of the multisectoral approach, but also intersectoral approach of partnerships, is that these underlying game dynamics that are driving these incentives to sacrifice the very things that are so important for future well-being are often not addressed. So in the game, the students and also younger generations and adults, everyone can join, will be entering into this Moloch kind of dominated world, and they have to then, through the game challenges, help to transform the Moloch game dynamics and help to restore the world tree of life, through which we're also developing now artificial intelligences that are trained, benevolent artificial intelligence, that are trained to actually support humanity in this transition. So everything we're doing is partnership-based. We're working with our partners, Haifa, for example, to create new governance model for decentralized autonomous organizations using blockchain technologies, as well as our partners in benevolent AGI and AI. So there's a lot that we're doing. Everything is based on teamwork and partnership.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. It's very inspiring to hear all these efforts and partnerships, especially in a week like this, I said. So thank you very much for that. For the audience, you're not an audience today, you're a participant to this dialogue, to the conversations we're having today. I have Frey over here who has the mic. So I would like to already open the floor. If you want to contribute into this conversation, or if you have any questions, you can already start from now on to raise your hand, and I will try to give you the opportunity to contribute. And that also counts for my live stream, who can talk to me with my sidekick over here, the iPad. Thank God for technology, as you said, Gerald. And I also have my first question to you, because we talked about activism, and we developed a beautiful definition for it, if you ask me, for now. How has the organization, because you got started as a law student helping marginalized people get access to the law system via Facebook and text messaging, and then 10 years of legal innovation later, Barefoot Law is a renowned initiative and has just opened an office in The Hague. How has the organization evolved from grassroots activities, and maybe activism, if I may say, in Uganda to an international undertaking?
Thanks. I think that's a 10-year story. I could sit here and talk for 10 years. Yeah, on Monday we had a good Tuesday, we had a celebration of our 10 years in The Hague, and it was a time to reflect. Our theme was failing forward, and lessons that we've learned over the past 10 years of successfully failing. So I think for me that captures and summarizes it. Barefoot Law started, like you said, as an idea There was no plan, no proposal, no theory of change. I had no idea what impact was. But it was more the passion and your definition of activism, I think, came in around that time. So we'd get the law. The problem that many of our societies face is that there is no system to successfully resolve conflicts when they arise. Because of that, conflicts are either left unresolved or they are resolved using crude methods. And that leads to eventually a breakdown of the rule of law, which eventually leads to a breakdown in development. And that's why I feel many countries a country is only as developed as its system for dispute resolution. The problem from where I come from is that people do not have access to the law. People are so far away from justice institutions, either in terms of distance, in terms of cost, in terms of ignorance, and there's a role that technology can play. So while a law student, I used to call into radio stations and draft small SMSs and blast these, use the same on social media, and eventually that grew to barefoot law that it is. The model now is we get the law, we simplify it, and then we broadcast it through a variety of systems. Again, it's interesting to see how this has changed over time from the most basic systems, like skits and plays, for those that do not know how to read and write, to an AI lawyer that we have that helps to provide guidance in 5 languages. And then we get the questions from those that we've shared this content with, and we guide them towards resolution. There are a lot of lessons that we've learned in terms of especially deploying technology. But when I look back at the 10 years, the most important lesson we've learned, and it's something I want us to maybe focus on, it was mentioned that I think we're only at about 15% for the SDGs. And I think we need to think differently to capture the remainder, because we have less than half the time, actually. It's, I think, 6 years and something, if I'm correct. And we need to think differently on how we are going to do these things. Firstly, we need to think of inclusivity. And I stress that from the models and the technology that we deploy. This technology is a gift and it's a curse. It's a gift in that it enables an organization like Barefoot Law to reach 1 million people, but it's a curse in that there are still people that do not even have access to the most basic gadgets. So as we are designing our systems and we are looking at innovation and technology, we should look at systems that are designed for inclusivity. And I think, personally, the next 6 years of this development agenda will be focused on ensuring these technologies are inclusive and accessible to all in a sustainable way.
Thank you so much. Also, when we speak of innovation, it's also good to mention the blessing and the curse that comes with the technology that we see today. And I saw you taking notes, and Peter, Gerald also reacted a bit to what you said. You guys are also allowed to react to each other if you want to. And I'm also, while you do, going to gaze and whether there are any, yeah, there's also someone there, but if any of you wants to react first, then I can go to one of the audience there. Would you like to react, or, yeah, maybe, can I call you Anneloes?
Yes, please do. No titles here.
Okay.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said, and I believe that the decentralization of governance and technology go hand in hand. And that's really important. So, for example, by using blockchain technology with a decentralized governance approach, we can really help make it much more inclusive. And that's also probably kind of the golden key towards the innovation that is necessary. And so I'm saying that also from, a small island developing state perspective where we are, where the centralized approach of both governance and technology is a major barrier.
Thank you. And Frey, there was someone over there. Can you raise your hand one more time so Frey's sure? Yeah. You're allowed to introduce yourself if you want to.
Yes, thank you, moderator. I'm Isabella Toth. I work for Cordate here in the Netherlands. My question will deviate a bit from what was discussed until now, and I apologize to you, because I was listening carefully to the panel and also earlier to the esteemed scientist. And I've been thinking of a couple of issues. First, about systems. How do you consider maybe this is a question for all of you, about how do you consider the impact of human nature onto the sustainability of dividends of investments in international cooperation, not development cooperation? Because I'm saying it everywhere where I come nowadays when we talk about these and sense of urgency, Agenda 2030. The World Development Report 2015 is Mind, Society and Behavior. It's pretty much the best ever and the least discussed about. That puts really at the forefront how human behavior is impacting investments in our work. Then I have a question about...
One second, maybe it's good to process the first question and then we can go to your second question. Is that okay? Just to keep it comprehensible?
I'm almost done.
Huh?
I was almost done.
Oh, okay, so is the second question
It's very quick.
Okay.
It's about the transformative innovation. A lady from Marrakesh, you brought that up. Thank you for that. How do you measure what is transformative? And I'm asking, what does the community here and yourselves think about the level of buy-in? Who needs to buy in for any kind of innovation to be transformative? Because I make the link with Global South. I'm really dreading that nowadays because after the General Assembly in New York, it was clear that Global South is not a homogeneous group. The BRICS, powerful economic powers are in it, so that changes that. And last, the lady from Tessa. Sorry, I don't know your name. Can we borrow the logo? It's about power the shift that I saw the most inspirational I found today until now. So I'm looking forward to other discussions. But power the shift, that's so cool. I looked it up on your LinkedIn, what you're doing now with Alexander, with Disrupt Development.
I really would like to ask you to wrap up. Thank you very much. You guys can also have a moment after the program about this logo. But going to your first question, maybe, Peter, do you want to react to that? Or anybody else of the panel?
No, they've heard me enough.
Yes, Peter, you can maybe respond. Eh?
I don't really know I'm not sure about the first question about human nature.
Neither did I. So the question on human nature was, to me, not entirely.
Could you maybe make your question really short and sweet one more time? Can I that's why I wanted to have a little pause. Yeah, shortly.
How does the human nature and the actions, how that manifests, whether we do good or bad, what do we find important? What do we mean by quality of partnerships? Where is that one dot on the horizon that makes us collectively go towards it? And if that is not there,
I think I'm going to take the charge and give this to Anneloes for a minute. Yeah, and then you can also...
That may help.
Yeah.
No, I don't really know about the question about how human nature, because human nature is, there's not one definition. I do find it interesting that we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, but at the same time, right now, there's also an Inner Development Goals conference going on in Stockholm, I think. And there's a quote that I heard somebody say, if we keep on thinking that what we're saving is outside ourselves, right, then we're not going to move forward. So I think that this human nature of like understanding who we are and what we want to save. Anybody you will ask, do you want clean water? Yes. Do you want clear skies? Yes. It's not political, you know. So it's not something that we should make political. So I think the human nature of like how we're going to invest. Yeah. So I think that's the only thing I wanted to say about that.
Yes, so very, very briefly, from a scientific perspective of systems, the behavior of systems and then human nature, if you're looking at the behavior of a system, you cannot look at that in terms of the elements of a system. You have to understand the deeper architecture, and that means archetypes and the structural coupling and interconnections and incentives and the feedback loops of a system. So far too often we're looking as if human nature is either good or bad, and we're not looking at the very sick and unhealthy systems in which that human behavior emerges. And I think this is why it's so important that we make really an effort to make the systems of our institutions healthy, because then we can start to incentivize and support the kind of innate, life-given, supportive potentials of human nature. And this also pertains to this sector, of course. So sometimes, again, I'm taking a global south perspective of here, or rather small island development perspective. Sometimes in the NGOs and the non-profit sector, these have not always been the most healthy systems in which they actually having to provide the development aid and cooperation. And this is perhaps also where the innovation aspect on the institutional element, also in this sector, is really important, so that we can start to both activate and also acknowledge and reward the best of our human potential.
So we need to keep self-reflecting in this as well. And what I always find also daunting is that this dependency relationship also continues from the NGO sector to places that really need us. And I also heard another word that really intrigued me. I think Saranel, you also mentioned this word, and Tessa too. I don't know any of you too, but disruption. That was very interesting to me. And Saranel, from employee activism to organizational activism, Mama Cash is globally known as a pioneer in addressing system challenges from different perspectives. And can you tell more about these disruptive examples also, if we're talking about systemic change in your work?
Yes, I think this will partially also answer the question as well.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, I wanted to say something on systems. I don't think that my feeling is that systems are not neutral. No, they're objective. They're human-made, and humans come with all kinds of internalized own oppressions, which are acted out in the way in which systems are built. So it's not an objective thing, and nor is it neutral, and it's always needing to be interrogated and disrupted. I think for me, the way in which Mama Cash actually fits itself in within this is our work largely funds those groups that are challenging the current systems of oppression. So it's the root causes of why we're sitting with the crises that we have today. And so that, in a way, means that you can't see change almost immediately. You need this kind of long-term interventions or long-term support in order to make those changes happen. But it's also the way in which we fund is also a disruption to that, because we're funding long-term, we're funding flexibly, we're funding core work of feminist movements and women-led groups who are on the front lines of the struggle. And that in itself, I feel, is disruptive, because not everyone's in it for the long game, and everyone's in a hurry to see change happen quickly, or measuring impact in ways that might not be the ways in which the groups that are at the front lines of the struggle actually experience impact or see impact in that kind of way. I think the very fact that we are here and that we exist as a feminist fund who funds other feminist funds and who fund feminist movements is also an act, and considering the context that we are in at the moment, is also it's a radical act. And that we have aspirations and ambitions to do more of what we're doing, I feel, is still a radical act in and of itself today in today's world.
And Saranel, thank you for that, because also an activist myself, and also especially for hoping for a revolution to happen in the Farsi-speaking regions, such as Iran and the fight of women there, and also fighting the Taliban. I'm also challenged in the longevity of it that it has, and we feel like there's such an urgency, and time also came up in also visioning So, and you mentioned like we cannot change systems that quickly and rapidly, but when we talk about disruption, that might be a quicker remedy in order to see what where the faults are within the system, and what main lessons can be learned from these disruptive examples pushing the boundaries of the global development system.
So I think for me, the most recent disruption that I can think of in the global development space was when George Floyd was murdered and opened the box, Pandora's box, on having conversations about anti-blackness, racial justice, the role of the global North governments and states in still perpetuating colonialism or colonial practices in the way in which we do international development and development cooperation. For me, that was the first disruption, and it was quick. It happened pretty quick, and in that moment, no sector was left untouched. I was in the UK at that time, working in an INGO that is an old INGO. It had really strong roots in its colonial legacy, and that was untouched. It was a moment where everyone in any organization had to come to some kind of reckoning with that. We're still, and then that happened, but the change that's following, we're still in conversation around what it means to decolonize aid. What does it mean to decolonize the funding infrastructure? We're still having conversations about that. I was at a conference recently, and it's been many years, and one of the main topics was, how do we do more trust-based philanthropy? I'm like, seriously? We're still talking about
Does it seem to you also that bringing up decolonization is almost an activistic thing to do, while it's also an adaptation of self-reflection and necessary? How does it feel for you to drop decolonization in rooms today?
When I first was doing it, it was a moment of activism, I felt.
Yeah.
But then I also tried to think about, I don't want to say that this is the point, this is the how can I say, the site of struggle. This is not the site of struggle. The site of struggle for me are those who are on the front lines of it, who are, every day having to survive, fight for the right to survive. And we're seeing it playing out in full force now. So this is not the site of struggle. This shouldn't be the site of struggle. And this is not where we should be able to name it and move it.
Yeah.
Move it in a forward way. But it is this kind of, tension about what we're giving up when we do decolonization. And it's about, the conversation is happening within the space of, almost scarcity. If I give up my power, then I have less of it and you have more of it, and then it's unequal. But it also means a disruption of our understanding of what power means, and how can we, extract it from its colonial and patriarchal trappings to create an understanding of power that is very different. And for me, that's disruptive.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm also, at any given moment, you're allowed to raise your hand and participate in the dialogue. Okay, I see two there. Frey, you can go to this right corner. Can you raise your hand again? Then Frey knows. Yes. And if you want, you can introduce yourself and your organization, whatever you prefer.
Thank you. My name is José Sluis-Doyle. I work for AMRE Flying Doctors here in the Netherlands. And my question is for Sarah Nell about your participative, that's the one I struggle with, innovative and participative, grant making. How did you bring donors along or not in that process of change that when you decided that this is the way you wanted to do grant making? Because I can't imagine all donors were jumping with joy.
Before we answer that, just to not assume that everybody is aware of what participatory grant making is, could you also briefly explain what that entails?
So participatory grant making at Mamakash is new. It's only 6 years old. And only as of last year, all 5 of our funds that we have are fully participatory. And the way that came about was, through our own internal learning, actually, and our own internal disruption of how we understand the way in which power, or how we hold power, and looking at that through a feminist lens. So it was a lot of internal introspection before we actually got to that point of saying, well, participatory grant making is the full embodiment of how we understand feminist grant making to be. And so when we talk about participatory grant making, it is giving up decision-making power on who gets the grants, essentially. And so we've set up a couple of different committees for each of the different funds that we have that are made up of communities who are eligible for those grants. So the biggest grant that we have, is, which is the Resilience Fund, is made up of members of the communities of women's rights organizations that are globally based. And essentially they make the decisions on who gets funded. And because we don't fund along thematic lines, groups submit applications that just basically say, this is what the issue is in my context, and this is why it needs money or funds. And their peers, then say, yeah, okay, yeah, this is the issue that needs attention, it needs money, and this is the groups that we feel need to be getting the money.
And did that also answer your question? You guys can... How did you bring the donors along was the question.
Yeah, this is... we've become known for participatory grant making, and so some of the donors who want to partner with us want to because we do our funding in this way. Not all of them, and we do have to go into spaces where we have to influence those donors by saying, well, you've come to us because we can move money in this particular way, and we can move money to places that are harder to reach, but we need to be doing it in this kind of way. And also we make sure that we're still able to meet the compliance regulations that donors would have in a way that we can still do the reporting process, but that is something that doesn't get passed on to our grantee partners. So it's still held by Mamakash, and it is in this kind of dialogue with the donor community as well. The Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs is one of our long-term funders.
Could you speak to the mic?
Sorry, yeah, the Dutch MFA is one of our long-term funders. They've been with us for a long time and participate, and they've been part of this journey with us in understanding and knowing that this is how we actually, this is how our grant making actually works and how it's done. And it's one thing that we're kind of celebrated and known for.
I would actually want to go to you, Tessa, because with Undercover Activists, you focus on employee activism. And your goal is to mobilize the workforce of organizations against accepting social inequities and environmental degradation as business as usual. And how activistic are employees, and how can employees of organizations become a bigger transformational force actually for good?
Big question.
Yeah. You're doing big things.
I actually don't need to mobilize the workforce, because I think people in businesses, and maybe just as a way to illustrate that, companies aren't keeping track of why people are leaving. But there is a lot of research out there right now. To quote is that Paul Polman, he's the former director of Unilever, and he did the Employee Barometer, which interviewed 3,000 people in the UK and the US. And basically more than 50% says that they consider resigning if the values of their own values don't correspond with the values of the company. And that 33% already has. And that number is actually increasing for Gen Z and millennials. And there's another study from Deloitte, which came out in 2023, which is 20,000 people around the world, which was really focused on Gen Z and millennials, basically saying that 50% is already trying to drive change in organizations. But unfortunately, only 15% of these people feel that they have the influence to do so. And in my work, because we host a training basically for people can register for a training if they feel like they would like some support in how they would mobilize internally. Sorry, the question was indeed on Power the Shift, which is a new course, which we're doing together with Disrupt Development, because it isn't limited to corporations. We work also with government, civil servants, with healthcare. There's a lot of places where the system just is too tight and people don't feel that what they're doing at their work actually makes a difference for what the kind of future that we want to create. So it's not about a clash. I feel that disruption is incredibly important to make things visible, but it's the first step. So I think that the next step is, you know, and someone made this quote, it's more important that we're together than in agreement. So how can we get people to stay on board? Because I think the climate movement and all these different activists outside organizations need people on the inside to drive the change. So that's basically what we're trying to do.
And so, Peter, Tessa's point is to also address global complex issues. It's important to be an activist at work. Would you, first of all, agree with that?
Well, maybe after this panel I consider myself an activist as well, with a new definition. But I think civil service and activism I believe, are different things, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I do think, however, that, and that is what we do as department and as ministry, that we work closely together, that we partner with activism in various ways. We, of course, probably the easiest, we are funding activism. Saranel gave some excellent examples. I would like to mention that also as the ministry, we, for instance, have a fund Leading from the South, where we fund local feminist movements, and we also leave decision-making to local or regional funds. So we're not involved in the decision-making on who gets funds. We leave it to organizations from the global South, and that's an example we're proud of. Not all our funding works that way, but it's definitely a direction we're moving in. Also in our civil society funding, our Strengthening Civil Society program of 5 years of over 1.2 billion euros. We support consortia of NGOs from the Netherlands, from the global South in various themes. But it's much more than just funding. It is issues like joining hands, partnering. It's about amplifying voices. That's what I did when I was, for instance, ambassador to Yemen.
Do you have examples of civil servants activism from your impressive track record in Yemen, also in Costa Rica?
Well, I'm not sure if it's civil service activism. It is about, for instance, amplifying voices of activists who cannot speak out or do not get the option of speaking out. I, for instance, in Yemen, raised in every single meeting I had with the government, with warring parties, with the United Nations. I raised the issue of participation of women in the peace process, in governance, in economics. For instance, we brought together in The Hague local activists from Yemen together with international activists, representatives from government, business, local parties, in order to get their voices heard. So this, I think we are not activists ourselves, but we can bring them to the table. We can also provide protection, as an example from my experience in Costa Rica.
So are you saying activist work from the inside is not something you agree upon?
Sorry?
So activist work from the inside, from inside ministry, such as civil servants, is not something you agree upon. It should be two separate things. Am I correct?
I say I would not call civil servants activists.
But if they call themselves activists from the inside out, would you agree with that movement? Because within government institutions, there's a layer of bureaucracy, of course, and that is limiting activist work from the inside. And it's also been backed up by research from Leiden University that states that a moral compass of civil servants increasingly chaves with their public roles. As you say, it's two different things. So how can we change this barrier? You're saying we shouldn't change this barrier?
I think it's not the biggest challenge we have. I think there's a lot of semantics there. I think what is most important is forming alliances, is working on the same goals. Of course, we mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. It's also countering the pushback. It's on civic space. But there are also moments, and I think that we can be proud of that, where activists and civil servants are not in agreement. We are, for instance, we are funding sometimes our own opposition.
Yeah.
And I think we should be proud of that, because I think dissent is a cornerstone of democracy. I think if there is dissent, if there is debate in the public space, I think decision making improves. So I think it's not. I'm not worried about these different labels. I don't think civil servants need to be called activists in order to be able to work together, in order to be able to work on similar goals.
Yes, Tessa, and then Jarell, do you want to respond first? Because Tessa, I see. Okay, you're dying to respond, so just to respond first.
I just wanted to say that I think the word activist is different for a lot of different people. In some countries, it's very dangerous to call yourself an activist, and in others it's not. So I don't know if it's my point that everybody should call themselves an activist. I do wanted to say that there's a public debate in the Netherlands around whether civil servants can be activists, and I know it's been playing out in the newspapers as well. Because they shouldn't be party to their own opinions. They should be carrying out the instructions or what their work is but there is a lot of activism happening here in the municipality in Amsterdam. Civil servants are coming together and writing letters basically saying that we need to do more on climate action. So besides their work, there is a lot of organizing happening in the civil service, in healthcare, in a lot of different places that I think goes beyond resistance to the current system is too incremental.
Okay, and Jarell, do you want to respond?
I come from a background where successful activism leads to systems change, and systems change can only happen with government adoption, or at least government involvement. I also come from a legal background, where some of the best precedents in legislation are by activist judges. So I think activism, I don't know about the debate that's going on in the Netherlands, but I think to reduce activism to an idea or an activity on the outside, to me, is to limit its effectiveness, at least from my background.
And thank you. Speaking about, in some places, it's life dangerous to call yourself an activist, especially on specific teams. And Barefoot Law is a grassroots organization, as I said, from Uganda, and the LGBTQI+ community from Uganda is being criminalized extensively, also by law. How can we address the challenges of grassroots access to legal systems in rural areas in Uganda?
That's an interesting question, and I'll look at it philosophically. To the question that was raised about our humanity. I think we should collectively focus on our humanity and not necessarily on our human nature. And the question we should be asking is, do the global development goals we have now, SDG 2030s, are they a best reflection of our aspirations as humanity? If yes, are they something we'll carry on beyond 2030, or did we get it wrong? If they're an aspiration of our humanity, how comes we're only at 15% in terms of implementing them? And for me as an individual, and I think for Barefoot Law, the ultimate law is humanity for us. And when it comes to humanity, and rule of law, of course, and access to justice, there is a lot of shrinking spaces. If we focus on our human nature, we get caught up in so many of these echo chambers. And again, I blame technology. It's one of the negative effects. And that echo chamber reinforces our beliefs. It reinforces our hatred against each other. And that hatred manifests in different ways and in different forms. In Europe, it manifests in a shift to the far right. Where I come from, it manifests against a certain group of people because of sexual orientation, because of gender, because of so many things, socioeconomic status and what. And I think when I look back at where this issue came from and how we can tackle it, I think we need to try and engage a bit more in dialogue, understanding our humanity and getting out of these echo chambers that we are constantly trapped in. I mean, this in itself is an echo chamber of progressives and liberals. It would be good to have had someone from the other side in this meeting so that we engage in this conversation for our collective humanity. We all like good weather. We all like clean water. We all like family. You know, our aspirations are the same, but how come where I come from, hatred manifests in this format? How comes where you come from, hatred manifests in this format? How comes people are dying in the Mediterranean and we don't seem to care? There's a war taking place 2,000 kilometers away and we don't seem to care. So for me, overcoming this hatred is something that we need to look at beyond the manifestation of this hatred. It may manifest against someone for their sexual orientation. It may manifest against someone for their skin color. It may manifest against someone for how much they earn, gender. All these are manifestations, but I think if we focus on our humanity, then we'll see where our point of diversion is. And I think our point of diversion, from my perspective, is the echo chambers that have been created by this technology that's, again, a gift and a curse.
Thank you so much.
So I think my solution is dialogue.
Thank you. I could keep listening to you, but I actually have also one more question.
I'm a lawyer, I talk a lot sometimes.
Peter, when we speak of maybe going out of these echo rooms, which is also becoming dangerous, partnerships also are very important cross-sector partnerships that drive social justice and sustainability. Can you give some examples? What more can government and institutions or maybe the ministry do to get out of these echo rooms and have these partnerships also?
Thank you. Yes, I think that's a very important topic to look at these cross-sectoral partnerships. And it is true that, well, on the one hand, we see a certain development. We see a lot of organizations, NGOs in the global north, changing their roles from traditional development funders more towards global advocacy. At the same time, we still see traditional or more traditional development cooperation very much focused on the country level, or sometimes thematically. But at the same time, and I also see what we are doing. We see increased funding in these global networks. For instance, on our strengthening civil society in our framework. We fund consortia like Fair, Green and Global or GAGA, led by Nicaraguan NGO FCAM, who are work on issues of gender, on global justice, on land rights, on environmental rights. Really not working in one country, not working on one theme, but really working on global advocacy. So that is a trend. It's something that we'll be looking at when we're going to develop our new framework for the coming 5 years from 2026 onwards. And this indeed will be one of the major discussions, how to move towards these cross-sectoral networks, and maybe not only looking at civil society, but also looking at social enterprise. So this is going to be a very dynamic discussion, and I would like to invite. We don't know how we're going to organize this discussion, but as you said, this is one.
I'm looking at Liana, maybe.
Chamber. Liana will for sure be involved, but I think all of us should be involved in this conversation that we're going to have on how to make our new program more future-oriented, more cross-sectoral.
I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to Peter, but we're actually running out of time, and I want to ask my last question to you, Anneloes, because looking at everything what we just discussed, and also I'm actually very inspired also by what Gerald has said about the manifestation of hatred and going beyond that. And I will come back to you, Tessa, that activism is basically an act of love. What is it, and what capabilities do we as humans need to develop to become these future humans that we envisioned, future ancestors, as you said? Also listening to this panel.
Yes, beautiful, and it's also such a big question. So I think the first thing as future humans is to realize that future human potential of our evolutionary next step is already within us. So future doesn't mean tomorrow. It means that life goes on, and we are life and we are nature. And we are an experiment of nature rather than us experimenting on nature. So that means all of us as living system have in these innate evolutionary capacities. We're part of the universe itself. So it's really important as future humans that we start to truly honor that and honor that in each other as well. The other way of our future human capacities is to get really creative with challenges. So I always like to say, look for the Trojan horses within your own organizations, help drive the systemic transformations, wherever there is an invitation really for you to come in and to help create a more humane and nature-wise and life-wise culture as well. So there are always openings, So focus on that, even if it's a tiny millimeter, and then expand that with your love and with your compassion, and think of yourself as the imaginal cells of an emerging new and planetary civilization that right now is going through a terrible birth process. But this is the time that we are going to have to engage head down into the birth canal. The wiggle room for excuses is over. Because if we don't go head down and we want to keep our head up and we always think we know everything best, the baby's not going to be born and mother's going to suffer. So I think life is really providing the right conditions right now for our collective birthing. But when you're going in the process, it can be dark. Can be difficult, but let's keep finding the ways to each other. The human heart is our greatest power.
Wow, can I have a round of applause for this panel? Thank you for the day. We're at the end of this panel, and I would also, another round of applause for all panel members for this part. You guys can get off the stage. Thank you so much. I could have kept on talking, and then all of a sudden an hour seems short. Usually I have half an hour for a panel, but this just really flew by. There were no questions from the live stream. I'm sorry, there was one question in the back. I remember you, but maybe you can ask the question to one of the speakers after the program. I apologize. Now, having listened to the panelists, we are going to a fun exercise. You know what? Just also stand up and do a little leg shaking, because what a subject. We were in a birth canal all together. So maybe also physically be present again in this mutual birth canal we are in, and in this new future that we're heading to. Thank you. That was it for the physical exercise. You can sit back down if you want to. And then, speaking of technology, Gerald, this is one that we like to use often, Mentimeter. I don't know if you know it. Let's open it, Mentimeter. You can scan this QR code with your phones. And there's an interesting question that we're collectively going to answer. But I'm going to give you, it always takes a minute to log in. And I'm already going to pose the question. After this panel and you listen to it, if you were to choose one bed partner to share the coming years within pursuit of a just and sustainable world, who would it be? The social entrepreneur, NGO, government, or business? And don't worry. You can see this question in Mentimeter again. Just waking you guys up. If you were to choose one bed partner to share the coming years with in pursuit of a just and sustainable world, who would it be? Tessa, I'm wondering where activists would fit in. I think it's the other. Citizens. Ah. Yeah. While this is moving, it's becoming a Thai NGO and social entrepreneur. Government is keeping up. Oh wow, this is interesting. So, while the results are popping up, I invite you to talk to your neighbor and ask to provide some insights within these answers, and the answer actually that you gave, and maybe share some insights about it. You have a few minutes for that now. Ik geef dit... Oh. Ik geef dit... ook even... Hey, nou, weer, hij doet het gewoon weer. Hij heeft me gewoon weer aanstaan. Ik had gevraagd om het niet te doen. We're gonna do this exercise again that I keep speaking until you guys are aware of me, and then you guys become quiet. Yes, let's all wrap up and come back to the program. It's amazing, you know? Sometimes I feel like I wish I could sing, so if I would like have this Oprah moment, everybody would become quiet. Yes, everyone, over here, over here, over here. Yes, thank you. You know, so actually, the right answer would of course be cross-sectoral partnership. All of it would have been correct. And maybe with all the excitement and continuation of the dialogue, that is what happened, and that's of course from Partos also what we hope that will happen, is this cross-sectoral partnership. There's of course no right or wrong answer, but I hope you guys are inspired to cross-partner after today as well, sitting next to each other. And I hear a hunch club there as well. Partnership happening over right there. Now, with all the focus on the future with Anneloes that we envisioned, we almost forget maybe the past, but of course we also need the past in order to know where we are going and where we came from. And we need to know the road we travel to come to the here and now, and we can also be proud of what we already have established. And one of those things is that's why we invited 4 of our previous award winners. 2 of them won a Now Us award, which is an award for projects worldwide to help make society more inclusive. 2 other speakers have won an innovation award, which is, as you probably guessed, an award for the most innovative project within the international development sector. And they explain their innovative projects and tell what happened to them since they have won the award. And what difference have their award-winning innovations made, and how are they doing today? I'm very excited to hear how, I lost the English word for aanmoediging, encouragement, yes, encouragement an award gives.